Hey, Explorer peeps. This is video lesson number 2 for the week of April 20th. It was great to see you at Google Hangouts last week. We'll have another Google Hangout this week, Wednesday from 12 to 1. Take a look at the email and the Schoology calendar to see when your time is. But we're going to get started this week with what you're going to need to know on your gene project to take the next steps. And we're going to start off with a little brain pop. So take a look. Let me share this with you.
Dear Tim and Moby, my parents both have brown eyes, but mine are blue. What's going on? From Tyra. Well, I bet there are blue-eyed people somewhere in your family tree. Eye color is just one of many physical traits we inherit from our parents. That passing of traits from parents to offspring is known as heredity. But remember that parents inherit traits from their parents, and so on, as far back as your family tree can go. Let's look at some pea plants to see how it all works. Yes, pea plants. Every living thing inherits traits. Back in the 1800s, a monk named Gregor Mendel used pea plants to study how traits like height, color, and shape are inherited. When Mendel crossed short plants with tall plants, he noticed that only tall plants were produced. Whatever produced these short plants seemed to disappear. Mendel called that tall height trait the dominant factor because it dominated or covered up the short height form. He called the short height trait the recessive factor. By the second generation of pea plants, those recessive short plant forms cropped up again. After tons of research, Mendel was able to predict that, on average, 1 out of every 4 pea plants would be short. Each plant has 2 genes that determine height. The tall gene, represented here by a capital T, is dominant, which means it only takes 1 of these genes to make a plant tall. It takes 2 short genes, represented by a lowercase t, to make a plant short. In the 19th century, a British geneticist named Reginald Punnett also experimented with peas and developed something called the Punnett square. Among other things, this Punnett square lets you predict the likelihood of what you would get if you crossed a tall plant with a short plant. An offspring gets 1 gene from each parent, either a tall or a short gene. Each plant produced by these 2 plants will be tall because each one has one of those dominant tall genes. But what happens if 2 of these new plants produce offspring? There are lots of ways this could turn out, but the most likely result is that we'd get 3 tall plants and 1 short one. Mendel only figured this stuff out after carefully studying 30,000 individual pea plants over an 8-year period. Well, I guess it's pretty reasonable to assume that he had peas for dinner every night. I think you're missing the point. Moby? Moby?
Okay, so as we review a little bit about Mendel and genetics, let's dive back into our notes from last week. I'm going to do a flip through review. We talked about Mendel. We talked about cells and how the DNA is located in the nucleus of the cells. We have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs of them, like 23 pairs of DNA socks. And when you unravel it, you get those base pairs of A and T, C and G. And then that code gives us all the information about who we are. We have 6 billion base pairs of A and T and C and G. And it spells out the code for you. In fact, you are a unique publication, a one-time publication in history of who you are, because nobody else has your exact sequence of A, T, C, and G that spells out the code for you, the blueprint for life. Now, Mendel started messing with that with pea plants and crossing different traits with different generations to see how it played out. And he developed an understanding of some of the rules. And we talked about last week, those rules include dominant and recessive. A dominant allele is a copy of a gene that codes for a trait that will automatically be made. A recessive allele is a copy of a gene that codes for a trait that will only show up if there is no dominant copy. And again, we get two answers to every question, one from mom, one from dad. So this week, we're going to take that a step further. Mendel looked at pea plants, tall and short. Saw again that in the first generation, the kid generation, they were all tall because they all had at least one dominant gene. But in that next generation, that kid generation, grandkid generation, there were about 1/4 that got the recessive gene from mom and from dad. And so all they had was the information to make short pea plants, and we see the recessive trait. Now, this week, we're going to add to that a Punnett square. Well, you just heard about the guy it was named after. Now I want to show you how it works. So let's start with a big R and a little r. Big R represents the round allele in pea plants. Little r represents the recessive wrinkled allele, that copy of the gene. Each parent has two answers to every question. Where'd they get them from? Grandma and grandpa. They each give one answer to every question. So when I set it up so that I put the two alleles from one parent on the top, the two alleles from the other parent on the side, and then I cross over and down to look at all four possibilities. It doesn't mean they're going to have 4 kids. It doesn't mean this is what the genome is going to look like. This is simply what are the possibilities between two individuals who have two answers to every question but can give one. And so I start by crossing the big R, little r down and over. Then the other parent crossing down and over. And what I end up with a completed Punnett square is all the combinations. All I'm looking at are the combinations of what the kids might have based upon the parents' genetics. So when I apply this then to, say, a guinea pig, let's say mom is big B for black fur, dad is little b for white fur. Well, when I do a Punnett square and cross over and down, the only possibility for the next generation is being big B, little b, heterozygous. And if they have that one dominant gene for black fur, then they will have black fur. And they are just a carrier then for that gene of white fur. It could come out in the next generation. So let's talk phenotype and genotype. Phenotype is physical appearance. Genotype is genetics. So when I'm talking about smooth pods or round pods or tall or short, those are all phenotypes. Pheno is just physical. It's the type of physical trait. The genotype is the type of genes behind the trait. So big S means two dominant alleles. That's a genotype. Big S is a genotype. Little s is a genotype. And they're actually called homozygous dominant, heterozygous, and homozygous recessive. I don't want you to get stuck on that. We'll come back to that later, but simply means you either have two of the dominant, two of the recessive, or one of each, which would be a hybrid. Now, as we look at this, there's one more aspect besides dominant and recessive. There's something called codominance or incomplete dominance. And it's really easy. It just means when you have two traits that instead of one being dominant over the other, they blend together. So as we take a look at the chickens, we have one individual that has both genes for black feathers. The other one has both genes for white feathers. And when you combine them, they have black and white feathers. Codominance or incomplete dominance are when you have two different expressions that are then shared if you get them both. Okay? So let me give you an example of that right now. Let me exit out. Take out your gene project, and let's take the next steps together. Last week, we started with those first 20 traits, and I'm going to use the first 3 today. So imagine that I established gene number 1 with the tail. The dominant capital T is a Komodo dragon tail. The little t is an elephant tail, okay? Number 2 is a tusk. Capital M is mammoth tusk. Small m is walrus tusk. Number 3, fur length. Capital Y equals yak fur length. Little y equals tiger fur. And again, doesn't matter what genes you have, you just need to have one option that is dominant and one that is recessive. So we should have the first 20 from last week. Now, turn with me to step 2, incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance or codominance is, again, when they share the trait. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I go with skin color, and I say big R equals red, big B equals blue, and if they get big R and big B, they have purple skin. Give you another example. Let's say you select glow in the dark as your codominant, and you say big B is blue glow in the dark, big G is green glow in the dark, both of which exist in the natural world. But if you get B and G, you get Seahawk glow in the dark. You get blue and green glow in the dark. So again, I want you to have fun with this. You're going to pick a gene, some trait, come up with 2 different options for that trait that could then blend together. It could be polka dots and stripes. It could be long fur, short fur. And if you get both, you get medium fur. It's some blend of the 2. Now, we're also going to work on steps 3 and 4 this week, which is as easy as flipping a coin. Let me demonstrate. So I've got a penny right here. Got heads and tails. I'm going to start with mom's genetics and figure out what mom has. So all I have to do is flip this coin twice to see what 2 genes mom has for each specific gene. Heads is dominant, tails is recessive. So let's use the example of wings. Let's say big W is wings, little w is no wings. I flip the coin, tails, okay? I flip it again, tails again. So if I got tails and tails, mom would be little w, and have no wings. If I flip for dad, tails. Oh, and I got heads. So dad would be big W, little w, and dad now has wings. So I'm going to flip the coin twice for each parent for each gene. And then I'm just going to write that down this week. So let's use the ones I selected up above as a few more examples. All right, so let's look at tail, Komodo dragon and elephant tail, okay? So let's go here. I flip the coin. Heads, Komodo dragon. Heads, Komodo dragon. So big T. Mom is going to have a Komodo dragon tail. Let's flip for dad. Heads, tails. So dad is going to have big T, little t, and dad is going to have Komodo dragon tail, which then ensures that the kid is going to have a Komodo dragon tail because mom can only give the dominant gene. We'll wait on that till next week. Now let's go down to the next one, number 2. Our gene number 2 was tusk, mammoth and walrus. So let me flip the coin again. Heads, tails. So I'm going to get heads, big M, tails, little m, and mom is going to have mammoth tusks. Now let's do the same thing for dad. Line it up. Okay, so flip for dad. Heads, big M, heads. So dad is going to have both dominant genes for mammoth tusks. Sweet, like mammoth tusks. And then fur length, yak and tiger. So let's go down to number 3. Mom, I'm going to flip twice. Tails, tails. Interesting. So mom is going to have tiger fur length. Let's flip for dad. Heads, tails. Dad is going to have heads, dominant, yak fur length, and tiger for recessive. Yak fur is dominant, so dad is going to have yak fur. So this week, we're going to work our way through mom's genotype and phenotype, dad's genotype and phenotype. And our goal by the end of the week is knowing what mom and dad look like, which is as easy as flipping coins and then figuring out genotypes and phenotypes. Now, I want to show you another angle on genetics. This is also from Brain Pop. On genetics. Take a look.
I don't know. Maybe the father was a tabby. Dear Tim and Moby, both my parents have brown eyes and I have blue eyes. How can that happen? From Emily P. Well, this is just a guess, but I'll bet one of your grandparents has blue eyes. Stop that. The color of your eyes is a factor of heredity, the passing down of physical traits from parents to children. That includes things like hair type, eye color, bone structure, and even parts of your personality. These traits are carried in our genes. Genes are made up of DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is arranged in pairs of strands called chromosomes. In humans, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes in each cell. That's 46 chromosomes in all. Just about every cell in your body has these 46 chromosomes in it. You can think of them as a computer program for your body. Because everybody's different, no two sets of DNA are alike. You get your genes from your parents, 23 chromosomes from your mother and 23 chromosomes from your father. Your parents got their genes from their parents, and so on. The genes from your parents combine to form your genes. Organisms that reproduce sexually, like people, have special cells just for making offspring. In animals, male sex cells are called sperm, and female sex cells are eggs. Sex cells are special because they have only a half set of genes. If your mother has brown eyes and your father has blue eyes, the chances are your eyes will be brown. This is because the genes that code for blue eyes are recessive, and the genes that code for brown eyes are dominant. That means that in most cases, the gene for brown eyes will block out the gene for blue eyes. You still have the blue-eyed genes in your DNA, they're just not expressing themselves. By the same logic, two parents with brown eyes might be carrying recessive blue-eyed genes. If a sperm containing this recessive gene comes together with an egg containing the recessive gene, the brown-eyed parents can make a blue-eyed baby. Really? Huh. Well, I guess you're right. Moby says that the genetic process that determines your eye color is a little bit more complicated than this. It actually involves several genes, not just one. But it's a good example of how traits are passed down from generation to generation. Of course, it's important to remember that genes don't determine everything. What we look like is largely determined by the genes we inherit, but factors like environment and nutrition can play a role too. For example, modern humans are taller on average than our ancestors because of better nutrition. But it's hard to overestimate how much our genes shape who we are. Are my parents nerds? Well, my dad, why do you ask?
Yes, my parents are nerds. I'm proud of being a nerd. All right, now, hopefully that helps clarify what we're learning as far as genetics and the rules of genetics. Both those links are in the file if you want to go take a look at them. Now, I want to talk about some bonus this week. If you would like to go do the gizmo of the week, it's all about mouse genetics. You will start with a video preview, click on it, watch it, and then you will launch the gizmo. Let me give you kind of a sneak preview of where this gizmo is going.
Hi, my name is Tia Brown, and I'll be your gizmos guru for today. Let's talk gizmos. I have green eyes. What color eyes do you have? Do you ever wonder why you have certain characteristics? In this gizmo, we'll breed mice to find out how traits or characteristics are inherited. Let's start by choosing one parent of each fur color and put them in the breeding boxes. Next, let's click breed. Now we have the offspring of the two parents in the box below. All the offspring have black fur. To show all combinations of the mice, let's select Show Genotype. When you hover over a mouse, you can see the genes it carries for fur color. This helps you distinguish between pure and hybrid mice and will help you determine why they all had black fur. By the way, you can take the offspring and put them in the holding cages on the bottom to breed later, or you can clear all the boxes and start over. Let's take the 2 mice from the holding cages. What do you think will happen when we breed the offspring? Interesting. We get 2 different fur colors this time, or 2 different phenotypes. Check the box that says Show Statistics to see the number of offspring with each fur color in the chart, or check Show as an approximate percentage. And when you're done experimenting with the mice, send them on their merry way through the escape door. Every gizmo has a set of lesson materials to help you plan. I'm going to share a few tips with you from these materials, and maybe a couple of my own as well. To introduce genetics vocabulary, I do an ABC lesson, activity before content, using the gizmo. Let the students learn the actual terms by giving their own definitions, and at the same time, seeing the visual representations of the abstract concepts.
Now, if we were in class, we would get to do all of that together. But since you're on your own at home, this is just a bonus activity that you may play with. My goal is that you would see characteristics moving from one generation to the next. You would see how traits are connected to genetics. You would see the relationship between genotype and phenotype, and you would have fun with it. So if you want to go further, you are welcome to, but you certainly don't have to. Now, that is mouse genetics, 1 trait this week, gizmo of the week. If you would like to play with that, I think that will be fun to experiment with and then see how genetics plays out. Now, the last thing I want to show you is masterclass. Again, this is super nerd option, but if you, like me, have kind of an inner astronaut and you would love to study what it would be like to become an astronaut, I've bought a masterclass and I will share it with you if you will email me. I'll give you the information of how to log in, and we will share that pass together, but it means that we cannot be on at the same time. So again, contact me via email if you would like to join the masterclass with me. Here's a sneak preview.
If you were born 120 years ago, the idea that we could fly wasn't part of normal society. Through the combination of a real sense of purpose and an enormous amount of work on behalf of a lot of people, we can make impossible things happen. 3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff. First Canadian to command the International Space Station. First Canadian to float freely in space.
How do you pass time on the International Space Station? Well, one astronaut decided to make a music video during his nearly 5-month stay, and it's become quite a sensation.
His YouTube videos are instant classics on all aspects of life in space, from eating to washing to waste management to toothbrushing.
When Chris Hadfield took command of the International Space Station, he inspired a new generation to reach for the stars.
When a human being can get into a rocket ship and leave the Earth, it gives me heart and gives me hope. I think exploration of the unknown, whether it's the unknown of the universe around us or just the unknown that's within each one of us, we can all work that into the reality of life and be joyful as a result of the hope of exploring the unknown. This class is for anyone who is interested in exploration, and not just exploring space. That's the obvious core of it, being an astronaut. But you learn a lot of things along the way to space about yourself, about how to turn yourself into somebody different than you used to be. It definitely has required that type of thought process to fly in space, but I'm really teaching this class to anyone who's interested in exploring a new idea, in exploring a new place, in exploring the things that you might be capable of. I'm Chris Hadfield, and this is my masterclass.
So if you would like to join me for class and astronaut training, then email me, let me know, and we'll talk astronaut training together. So, quick review. Everything that you need will be in the Schoology folder for this week. All the links, the video lesson. Your schedule will be clearly articulated for each day. And we've got a Google Hangout next week, Wednesday from 12 to 1. Check the schedule for your time. And as always, if you need anything, email me and I will get right back to you and help you out. Have a great week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys this week. Thanks.